Dear colleagues in the teaching profession, my name is Tindi Seje. I serve as Director in the Teaching Learning Methods Unit at the University of Technology. Now, this beautiful session, we would want to look at the scholarship of teaching and learning. This is a trending topic if you look at the international trends in the teaching learning landscape. Of course, this beautiful morning again, I would want to ask you to remember that in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the others find themselves equipped to deal with the world that no longer exists. And this is why I would want us to participate continuously in these in-house capacity building sessions so that we really inherit the earth. Well, so by the end of this session, we should have several learning outcomes taken care of. But without going to those learning outcomes, I would want to give you a survey. Now, have you published an article on teaching and learning? This is a question, a rhetorical question for you. Have you subscribed to a teaching journal or journals that deal with teaching? I'm also wondering whether you have ever skimmed through journals that relate to teaching. I'm also wondering, have you attended teaching conferences or workshops that aim at equipping you with those skills and pedagogical acumens that we need to leverage on as we teach and learn? Now, finally, have you done other activities in scholarship of teaching and learning? Have you ever been part of them? The answer is for you to give. Now, there is a professor called Ernest Boye who did a book, Priorities of the Professorate. And in that book, he conceptualized around the topic of scholarship reconsidered. He gave us about 4 concepts to this scholarship of teaching. That is scholarship of discovery, scholarship of integration, and scholarship of application, and finally scholarship of teaching. When you look at scholarship of discovery, we are looking at research that increases the storehouse of new knowledge within the disciplines. We look at scholarship of integration. We are thinking about efforts by a faculty like you and I to explore the connectedness of knowledge within and across disciplines, and thereby bringing on board new insights, into research. But when you look at scholarship of application, we are thinking about those that lead faculty to explore how knowledge can be applied to consequentially solve problems in our communities and societies. And finally, scholarship of teaching that I'm talking about now looks at teaching not as a routine task, but as perhaps the highest form of scholarly enterprise, involving the constant interplay of teaching and learning. And so this discussion we are leading this day is to help us think about scholarship of teaching and learning. Now, you note that faculty who are involved in scholarship of teaching and learning tend to frame and systematically investigate questions that relate to students' learning, the conditions under which it occurs, what it looks like, how to deepen it, etc., etc. And they do so with an eye not only to improve their own classrooms, but also to advancing practice beyond it. So what's the difference between scholarship of teaching and learning from the ongoing self-assessment of our own teaching that's currently ongoing? Of course, it's always public, peer-reviewed, and critiqued, and exchanged with other members of our professional communities. And that is very, very, very important. It's important, therefore, that as we go into class to teach, we have engaged in this scholarship of teaching and learning, and we can make our teaching resources transparent for the entire globe to scrutinize, and be able to give us feedback that will improve our teaching learning. Now, scholarship of teaching is where the instructor is aware of modern pedagogical developments and incorporates them in their teaching where appropriate. This is where we reflect on as scholars. We reflect on, we assess, and we attempt to improve our teaching in classroom. We do some action research in our teaching and learning. It's also worth noting that scholarship of teaching and learning kind of research and publication, and possibly we also get grants in works that relate to education. So I want to make a call here in my preamble that we should engage in scholarship of teaching and learning so that we not only improve our teaching in class, but also we can, publish, we can invite or, win grants in works that relate to our teaching and learning. Now, there are those basic features of professional, those professional features of scholarly work. One is that it requires a high level of discipline-related expertise. You've got to be an expert in your field to engage in scholarship of teaching and learning in your field. You've got to, conduct it in a scholarly way with very clear goals, adequate preparations, and appropriate methodology. It also requires that you, appropriately and effectively document your teaching and then disseminate them. This reporting should include a reflective critique that addresses very significant work that you're currently doing, the process that was used and what was learned in the process. The take-homes will be very, very important. Of course, like I said, it has significance beyond the individual context. When you get in this, you break new ground, you become very innovative, and you can replicate it and elaborate it so that we use it in the different contexts and environments of teaching and learning. Now, this work, both the process and the product, are a result of reviewed and judged meritoriously so that we can look at the significance, and this is of course done by a panel of peers or discipline experts, depending on what would you prefer. Of course, I will have given you a schema of scholarship teaching and learning, but you maybe go for a coffee discussion somewhere, or maybe at the water cooler, water point, you get some ideas that are very intriguing, that are stimulating, and then you do some literature review, and when you go to class, you can make some changes, usual changes that you can make over and over again with your students. You make some inquiry kind of, and then make it a research project, talk with a colleague about it, write a paper, and then disseminate your findings. Of course, this this births a peer-reviewed article. Now, today's scholars of teaching and learning treat their classrooms and programs as a source of very interesting questions about learning. They also find ways to explore and shed lights on these questions that we're talking about. They also use this evidence that they find in class in designing and refining new activities and assessments that they always conduct in class. Today's scholars also share what they have found out with colleagues who can comment, critique, and build on these new insights that will ultimately help improve the content and delivery process. The baseline of teaching and scholarship teaching and learning is that it provides us with evidence that underpins our learning and teaching practice. As with most other disciplines, tertiary teaching has a growing research literature that should allow us to teach in very new and improved ways that we do not need to teach as we were taught. Some of us are teaching using the yellow pages that were used when we were being taught in our undergraduate years or secondary school years. But this scholarship of teaching and learning is an invitation for you to rethink, regroup, replan, launch your teaching endeavors in higher education with a view to providing empirical literature, empirical evidence on what you have done over the years and how it has impacted your teaching positively. Of course, there are three key elements here in scholarship teaching and learning. There is the information. This is theory. There is the experiment, where you go to class and conduct experiment basing on the theory that you heard about. Then there is the public. And when you talk about public practice here, you make your findings public. You disseminate your outcomes, your research outcomes. And this also allows for the larger public to critically scrutinize, critically reflect on your output and again give you feedback that can inform your learning. So I am trying to say that your teaching should not be private any longer. You should not make your lecture plans private. You should not feel like you have all the rights over your, lecture notes. If you allowed other colleagues a second opinion, if you allowed a third opinion, you probably improve and benchmark with the best and allow the best to come out of your teaching plan. So teaching that makes difference in theory and practice is what we're talking about here. So we are trying to invite you as lecturers to allow students to be partners in your scholarship of teaching and learning. You may be in a position as you develop your teaching career to include your students as partners in your scholarship of teaching. There are several reasons for doing this, and they are not limited to gaining further insight into the higher education experience of your students beyond what you would gain with the students as subjects of your research. So when you allow them to be co-creators of knowledge, when you allow them to be partners in knowledge creation, you'd also be encouraging what is called learner-centered pedagogy, where you as a lecturer or as a teacher also benefit in the teaching learning process. It also helps change the power dynamics between the students and yourself. Now, this really is very important. Depending on the part of the world where you teach, there are communities or cultural reasons that make students be a bit self-centered, a bit closed. But if you allow them to be part of your scholarship of teaching learning, it creates a paradigm shift in the power dynamic between you as a lecturer and your students, and therefore leverage on this and create good learning. It further engages students. It increases students' ownership of their learning, which is very, very important. And so we are saying, colleagues, that we need to do scholarship of teaching and learning. Why? Because it will foster significant, long-lasting learning for students. It will also help enhance practice and profession of teaching. As lecturers, as teachers, we'd want to take it to the next level in defense of the practice of teaching and learning. Take it to the next level by involving learners in the scholarship of teaching. We'd also want to bring faculty's work as teachers into the scholarly realm where it's available in the public repository. They can refer to it, build literature on it for further researches. They can refer to it to build design for further researches. They can look at it and build background of, or conceptual background for their future studies. So it will bring your scholarly, your work in the scholarly realm. Also, very, very important are the questions that we need to ask in the scholarship of teaching and learning. There are three basic questions. One of them is instructional knowledge. This that relates to components of instructional design that you're part of. The second one will be pedagogical knowledge. You appraise pedagogical knowledge. Student learning and how to facilitate it. How does it occur? And how do you facilitate it? And finally, we also think about curricular knowledge and goals, purposes, and rationale for courses or programs. Of course, when you go teaching, you think about the course learning outcomes or the program learning outcomes and the national educational programs, educational goals. Think about the Vision 2050 for this country, for example, and then the midterm goals, and look at the graduate attributes and the national qualification frameworks and the dictates, in as far as how we must think and map the long-term goals, national development goals with the program outcomes, with the graduate attributes that the university intends to, give, and with the subject learning outcomes, and of course with your objectives of teaching that very day. Of course, this can also be referenced in three phases again. Look at them the other way around. Then look at content. What should I do? Look at the process. How did I do it? Or how should I do it? And look at the premise. On what reason am I doing it? Why does it matter? This is very important. Again, that is why I'm giving it another third view. How do I do it? The course design, methods, assessments. Are they effective? The instruction, is it effective? Facilitating students' knowledge. Was I successful as a lecturer with my pedagogical, endeavors? Arriving at goals and rationale for courses. The curricula now. Is it really benchmarked? Have you benchmarked your curricula with the best? Of course, we really need to look at the industry demands. If you benchmarked your curriculum with the industry, if the content of your curriculum is informed by the industry needs, then you realize that the stakeholder involvement is very high, and your output as a lecturer or as a university also will go up, because what you're going to produce is fit for purpose. We'll go out there and solve problems. And we'll then probably create what is called a blue-collar economy, blue-collar boom, where these learners who leave school do not just go and look for jobs. We create job creators rather than job seekers. And if we don't do this, I think we are in for a very big shock. And finally, as I conclude, I would want to briefly take you through evaluation of your teaching as a very critical component of the scholarship of teaching and learning. It's very fundamental that as we go to teach, we seek to evaluate ourselves as teachers and our performance, it's very, very important, therefore, that you allow students to evaluate you. You could allow colleagues in the profession to evaluate you. You could allow your seniors, we call them superordinates, to evaluate you, and allow yourself to do critical self-reflection on your output and productivity. So evaluating your teaching and your students' learning helps you to reflect on how to improve students' learning. And it's very, very, very important that we do this. There are so many ways of doing it. Of course, we may use questionnaires. You design self-administered questionnaires. At the end of the course, you dispense them to the learners. It could be done online if you have learning management systems. It's very, very easy. But again, I'd rather that this is done before the start of examinations, because students or learners are likely to be biased. A few of them, maybe, when they have started for exams and maybe the exams did injustice to them, then if you call them to evaluate you, they may not do justice to it. You also need to think about, start, stop, and continue. You could ask the learners, at what point could you please evaluate my start, how I start the teaching? What do you like about how I start? What do you like in the middle? And what do you like at the end of my teaching? So this may give you three-fold step that will help help you as a reflect on your teaching. Think about the 1 minute paper. You can give them a paper and ask them, please, for 1 minute, can you think about one thing that you'd want me to change in my teaching? Bus groups, you can allow them to, in group, think through and give you what you think, written down, what you think areas that you need to improve on. We have student-generated statements where you will allow them again to write statements, and this is very excellently done on learning management system, where they can privately tell you what to, but of course, remember, learner anonymity is very important with feedbacks. When you get this feedback for learning, we really value anonymity of the students. I would appreciate if you looked at this process constructively, not as a means of punishing you. Of course, I know some few learners, some few dishonest learners may use this opportunity to punch you by, saying something nasty about your teaching. But please, as a fine colleague, senior colleague in the profession, use this to leverage your upward productivity. Of course, I said again that leadership for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning is our business. Why should scholars like you and I participate in this? It's very, very important that you not only become an expert in teaching in your discipline as a physicist, but also you become a consultant in physics, where if we'd want to do curriculum review, if we'd want to revisit or check for compliance in curriculum, then you can be called on as an authority to give expert advice. Because not only do you command the content well in physics, but also you know how to teach it. So you become a teaching, learning expert in physics. And we are in short supply. Higher education is in short supply of this kind of experts. If you are in survey, you're not only an expert in survey, but you are also an expert on how to teach survey. And this cuts across all disciplines and that we teach in higher education. So a clear focus on students' learning is needed. We need a strong disciplinary foundation if this is to succeed. We need multiple methods, both qualitative and quantitative, if this will succeed. We also need to embrace this peer review that I've talked about. And finally, like I said, we need the concept of sharing work across disciplines so that you, as a physicist, I can be understood in the domain of electrical engineering. I could be probably appreciated in mechanical engineering, structural engineering, survey, and so on and so forth. So we really need the scholarship of teaching. As I conclude, there are so many ways that educational leaders can support the scholarship of teaching and learning. Like I say, you can do campus awareness across discipline. You can embrace existing efforts that departments and faculty are putting in place. You can try and do what is called graduate education fairs, where you partner with your graduate students and look at how to improve teaching and learning in the graduate school, in the university setting. You can also use undergraduate research. Excellent researchers coming out of undergraduate projects. We could harness this and hone that skill and use those outcomes to inform you and I as scholars to improve our teaching learning outcomes. We also could design what is called centers of excellence. Now, most universities have a department like where I work, which we call centers of excellence or center for teaching and learning, where colleagues come together and help each other build capacity. We capacitate ourselves on matters teaching and learning. Like I said again, we can also look at ongoing support. We can consider ongoing support in centers of teaching and learning, like Teaching Learning Methods Unit, where I am a team leader. We can, you can call on continuous support from fine colleagues to help you, think through or wrap your brain around this concept of scholarship of teaching and learning. Like I said, you can also do literature review, do critical literature review on the latest trends on teaching and learning. This will really help you. Of course, you can also look at developing criteria for, mapping this kind of growth and initiative. So that also will go ahead to help you understand how to teach. Of course, we also can consider looking at annual reports and post-tenure review. If you look at contract renewal reports, maybe end of tenure reports, you could look at your gaps and pitfalls and areas where you need to improve, and probably this can also be plowed back in the improvement of our teaching and learning. And finally, we can also think about teaching awards. We need to think of our teaching with the same intellectual energy and level of inquiry with which we think about what we do in our laboratories or who we sit down with when we are writing a poem. That's very, very important. So, fine colleagues, as I conclude, I want to say that please, your disciplines learning and teaching journal is very, very important. This will be what we're looking for. Create a community of inquiry, a community of practice, a community of support that will help you. Go online and search for that critical friend. Search for a higher education learning and teaching journal in your discipline. You will probably only have to search on Google for something like maybe civil engineering, higher education learning and teaching journal, where discipline is your discipline. Maybe chemistry, maybe architecture and building, maybe it could be civil engineering. Choose a learning and teaching journal from your discipline and skim through the table of contents. Look at the latest issues to get an idea of what is currently trending in teaching and learning in your own jurisdiction, in your own field of expertise. Ladies and gentlemen, that will be very, very helpful. So get some guiding principles that are from our take home from our presentation here, and you'd really, really thank me later. I want to conclude this session by inviting you to reflect with me that we do not suffer shortage of ideas. We do shortage of execution on our learnings. I must end with this tattoo, that ideation without execution is delusion. So please go out there and work on the ideas we have learned from this session. Let's meet again in our subsequent sessions. I hope I've been of service to you. Thank you so much. I remain Tindi Nuru Seje. Thank you.